If you stand on the beach at Sunny Isles and look up, you will see a wall of glass towers that breaks a rule almost nobody thinks about. Inside, condos sell for $20, $30, $40 million. People pay for the view. The most permanent thing money can buy. But the ocean is not the only thing moving here. The towers are sinking too, inch by inch, while the sea rises up to meet them. The most expensive coastline in America is sinking into the thing that made it valuable, and this time, money cannot buy its way out. $55 million. That was the price on a single full-floor penthouse at the Mansions at Aquilina, one tower on this strip of sand north of Miami Beach they call Millionaire's Row. Down the beach, another building parks your car in the sky beside your living room, 60 floors up, so you are never separated from the Bugatti. For 30 years, this was where the world came to park its money and let it sit somewhere safe. It flew in from South America, from Russia, from anywhere a wealthy family wanted their cash in American concrete instead of their own currency. A condo on the water here was a bank account you could sleep in, and it did not much matter whether anyone ever slept in it. Whole floors sat dark for most of the year, owned through shell companies and visited for a week each winter. A building could be nearly sold out and still look half empty from the sand at night. What mattered was the address. So the developers built for that buyer. The Porsche Design Tower with its car elevators. The residences by Armani Casa, styled by the fashion house itself. The Ritz-Carlton, the St. Regis, the Trump Towers running up and down the sand. Each one taller and glassier than the last. Each one selling permanence in a slightly more expensive wrapper. And the amenities became their own arms race. At the estates at Aquilina, the developer built a 45,000 square foot pleasure palace called Villa Aquilina, with a Formula One simulator, an indoor ice rink, 4 bowling lanes, a golf simulator, a movie theater, and a room styled after a Wall Street trading floor. Karl Lagerfeld designed the lobbies. None of it was really about need. At this altitude of wealth, the excess was the point, there to prove that whoever lived behind that glass had truly arrived. That was the whole pitch. A piece of the horizon that could not be manufactured or copied, sold on the promise that it would outlast everyone who bought in. And for a while, on a coast that stayed calm and dry and kept climbing in value, nobody had any reason to check what all of that weight was standing on. Here is the part the brochures leave out. South Florida is not built on rock. It is built on limestone, young and soft, and full of holes, laced with layers of loose sand. If solid bedrock is a table, this is a sponge. Water moves through it. The sea moves through it. And limestone does something rock does not. Slightly acidic water, moving through it for centuries, slowly dissolves it, hollowing out voids underground. On top of that, under enough weight, the sand grains packed inside can shift and settle tighter, like sugar sinking in a jar when you tap the side. Now set a 60-story glass tower on that sponge. Then build the next one right beside it, driving pilings and pounding the ground for 2 years straight. Then do it again, all the way up the beach. In December 2024, scientists at the University of Miami published what happens next. Using satellite radar, 222 images taken from space between 2016 and 2023, they measured the ground under these buildings down to the millimeter. It is the same technology used to watch volcanoes swell before they erupt, and it caught something nobody expected. 35 towers along a 12-mile stretch from Miami Beach up to Sunny Isles were sinking, not dramatically, between 0.8 of an inch and just over 3 inches over those 7 years, but measurably on a coastline where the assumption had always been that a finished building simply stays put. In parts of northern Sunny Isles, nearly 70% of the buildings showed it. The number itself, an inch or 3, is not what worries engineers. Buildings are made to settle a little, evenly. The danger is when one corner drops faster than the rest and the structure begins to rack and crack under its own weight. That stress has to go somewhere, and it usually goes into the concrete, the same concrete these inspections keep finding already tired and salt-bitten. The list of affected buildings reads like a directory of Sunny Isles luxury: the Trump International Beach Resort, the Ritz-Carlton residences, Regalia, the residences by Armani Casa, and one of the worst, the Porsche Design Tower, the car elevator building. A second satellite data set put its movement closer to 10 or 12 centimeters, though part of that may be the tower leaning rather than sinking straight down. Either way, it should not have been moving at all. These are not cheap buildings, and they are not neglected. They are some of the most expensive addresses in the state, and they are on the move. Then came the detail that turned it from a curiosity into a question. About half of these towers were less than 10 years old. By every rule of engineering, a modern high-rise does its settling in the first couple of years and then stops. These had not stopped. The likely cause, the researchers said, is that the sheer weight of the buildings, plus the vibration from all that construction, is still squeezing those sand grains deeper, maybe helped along by tides pushing groundwater back and forth beneath the foundations. The senior scientist on the study said it as plainly as it gets. Almost all the buildings at the coast itself, they're subsiding. And then, even more bluntly, it's a lot. The ground under all of it was slowly giving way. If this were only a story about a few inches, it would stay a curiosity. What makes people take it seriously is what happened at 22 minutes past 1 in the morning on the 24th of June, 2021. That night, in the town of Surfside, right in the middle of this same strip of coast, a 12-story condominium called Champlain Towers South came apart. Not slowly, in seconds. Most of the building dropped straight down into its own footprint while people were asleep inside. 98 of them died. It is still one of the deadliest building collapses in American history. For weeks afterward, crews dug through the rubble, first for survivors, then for remains, and the country watched a beachfront condo tower, the kind millions of people vacation beside, become a grave overnight. Now, one thing has to be clear because it matters. Investigators did not blame that collapse on the ground sinking. They pointed to corroded steel, crumbling concrete, water that had been leaking into the structure for decades, and design flaws baked in from the start. Surfside was a maintenance failure, not a geological one. But it ended in assumption. For half a century, South Florida had quietly believed that a big concrete tower on the beach was, for all practical purposes, permanent. In one night, that belief died with those 98 people, and the whole state suddenly needed to know what its towers were standing on and how well they had been kept. Miami-Dade and Broward had actually required a 40-year recertification since the 1970s, but it was a local rule, unevenly enforced, and Champlain Towers South had been flagged with problems years earlier and still stood. So the state acted with a law called Senate Bill 4D. It sounds like dull paperwork, but it worked like a bill coming due. Every condo 3 stories or taller now has to pass a structural inspection at 30 years old, 25 if it sits within 3 miles of the coast, which on these islands is all of them. And the law forced condo associations to actually fund their repair reserves. This is where the real money lives, because of a habit these buildings had gotten away with for decades. For years, condo boards would vote to waive those reserves, skip the savings, keep the monthly fees low, keep the owners happy, and push the cost of the aging building down the road to whoever owned the unit later. From the start of 2025, that door closed. Associations can no longer vote to skip the reserves for the parts of the building that hold it up. The savings account became mandatory, and Surfside was what had been waiting at the end of the old road. And the timing is brutal, because it is happening to everyone at once. Roughly 2/3 of every coastal condo in South Florida was built before 1990. That is a whole generation of buildings hitting the same wall in the same few years, all of them suddenly required to open up their walls, inspect their own bones, and pay for whatever 30 or 40 years of salt air had been eating. The bills are the part nobody was ready for. Special assessments, the one-time charges, and association hands each owner for repairs are now running from $30,000 to over $200,000 per unit on coastal buildings. Not for a nicer lobby, just to keep the building standing and legal. And this is the cruel part of the luxury coast. Someone who could stretch to buy a $2 million condo cannot always absorb a surprise $200,000 bill on top of it, especially if they are retired on a fixed income in a unit they bought back when the fees were still cheap. You own a beautiful place on the water, worth millions on paper, and a letter arrives telling you to write a check the size of a house or lose it. So the for sale signs go up, and that is where owners find the second trap, because the money that used to flood into these towers has quietly changed its mind. Start with insurance. Florida's property market has been in open crisis for years, and some buildings have watched their insurance costs multiply several times over in just a few years. Insurers now write exclusions for exactly the structural damage these inspections keep uncovering. Others walked away from the coast entirely, pushing whole buildings onto Citizens, the state's insurer of last resort. A tower that cannot get affordable insurance is a tower almost nobody wants to buy into, then the mortgage. After Surfside, Fannie Mae, and Freddie Mac, the two institutions that stand behind most American home loans, added condos with unresolved structural questions to a blacklist. A building with deferred maintenance, thin reserves, or an open inspection gets flagged as unwarrantable, and a unit in a blacklisted building cannot be bought with a normal loan. That leaves cash buyers. And cash buyers know it, so they bid low. Every low offer resets what the whole building is worth. One discounted sale becomes the number the next appraiser uses, and the next seller is stuck under it. And the trap tightens on itself. Every owner who sells cheap or simply stops paying and walks away leaves a bigger repair bill to be split among the ones who stay. Fewer payers, higher shares, more people scrambling for the exit, lower prices still. It is a spiral that feeds on itself, and the people most likely to be caught at the bottom of it are the ones who cannot write the check to leave. Put it together and you get a trap, a unit that costs a fortune to insure, that a normal buyer cannot finance, carrying a six-figure repair bill on a floor of a building the satellites say is sinking. The $40 million view is still there in the window. The money is now stuck inside a building that is slowly sinking into the sand, and there's no clean way to get it out. It raises the question the whole coast is quietly trying not to ask. If you had that kind of money, and you knew what the ground was doing, would you still buy the view? Because the ground giving way is only half of it. The other half is the water, and the water is not waiting. The sea sat nearly flat here for most of the 20th century. Since the 1990s, it has climbed several inches, and the rate keeps increasing, which means the safe assumptions these towers were designed under are already out of date. A few inches sounds like nothing, but on a flat barrier island that sits only a few feet above the tide, a few inches is the difference between a dry street and a wet one. You can already see it. A few times a year, on the highest tides, seawater climbs up onto Millionaire's Row. Not from a storm, not from rain. On a clear, sunny afternoon, the ocean simply pushes up and floods the streets from below. The locals call it sunny day flooding. Miami Beach has already spent something like $500 million raising streets by as much as 2 feet and burying pumps beneath them, just to push that water back out. In some neighborhoods, the streets now sit lower than the sea beside them, kept dry only by pumps that switch on when the tide comes in. And here is what makes South Florida different from every other eroding coast on Earth. You cannot wall out the sea here. Everywhere else, the answer to a rising ocean is a bigger barrier, a taller seawall, a levee. You hold the line, but you cannot hold a line through porous rock. The Atlantic does not stop at the seawall and wait. It seeps sideways through the limestone and comes up from underneath, through the storm drains, through the ground floor, through the foundation itself. You can build the wall as high as you like. The water goes under it. So look at what is happening on this coast, all at once. The towers are settling down into the sand. The sea is rising up through the rock. The reserves are empty. The assessments are due. The insurers are leaving. and the lenders have closed the door. 4 separate pressures, and every one of them points the same direction, down. For most of the last century, the ocean was the asset. Now it is the liability. Run the lines forward, and the picture only gets worse. The towers keep settling. The sea keeps rising, faster each decade. The insurance keeps climbing until, for some buildings, it may simply stop being offered at all. And every year the water spends a little longer, standing in streets that were supposed to be dry. The buyers who can read that trend are already looking inland and up for higher ground. The ones who cannot or will not are betting that the pumps and the seawalls and the engineering hold together long enough for them to sell to someone else first. The question the coast is trying not to answer is what Millionaire's Row looks like in 30 years, when the assessments keep coming and the insurance keeps climbing and the tide keeps creeping a little higher up the drains. Nobody down here has a good answer, and the developers are still building. New towers are going up on the same sand right now, sold to the same kind of buyer, with the same promise of permanence, while the satellites watch them settle, millimeter by millimeter, into a coast the sea is quietly taking back. You can raise the roads and run the pumps around the clock, but you cannot pump the ground itself. A unit the water has reached does not sell. The people who bought the horizon thought they were buying the one thing that would last. It turns out it was the one thing that was always going to move.